All right, good morning. Mike DeFrancisco is here, so we can start. Thanks, Mike. All right, so the keynote we have been waiting for, uh, but if this is your first time here, or there's a reason why some of the airlines have started to get a little bit fun just to keep things interesting. We're doing the pre-flight briefing now, so even if you're a frequent keynoter, you still get to get the briefing. Out that way to the right gets the fire doors, or you can go to the left. Like if there's a big fire on that side, go that way. There's the doors. I will have to say, oh yeah, that's another way out. Go to the left, only the left, otherwise you're going to go to the kitchen, which is probably what's burning. And there's a big fire exit with big fire alarms on it. I would think that's a way out, but they didn't tell us about it. So if you see the hotel staff going that way, probably a good clue. So we are your general chairs for today. I'm Eric Berger, general chair of DySPAN.
And I'm Nick Lanneman, General Chair of Spectrum Week. Welcome.
Who said generative AI can't be fun?
We've said this before, but we'll say it again. This has been a complicated event to put together, but an important one. And so we really want to thank the Spectrum Week Organizing Committee that worked together over many months to figure out this agenda and try to distill it and make it easy for you to engage in. Thank you all.
As well as the DySPAN Organizing Committee. This is why we had good papers, why we actually are going to get the publications out. If anyone here has done EDAS, you know that's a huge, huge job. The local chair, I mean, how have things been here at the hotel? Good, yay, yeah. Industry liaison, again, thank you, Viavi, for the open bars last night and Monday, and to National Spectrums Consortium, making it affordable for students. We have tutorials, which we'll get to in a moment, demos and posters, publicity, all those workshops. And again, for those students who are here on a NSF travel grant, thank you, NSF, but also thank you to Joao. We also said we weren't going to do this, but we are thanking our staff. If you're here, you know where the keynotes and panels are. If you're not, come on over. Overflow next door. That's simulcast live, and actually, it's a much better job today because I was hearing echo last time. Now it's perfect. And the sessions are going to be recorded. We've already talked about the sponsors. I do have some more DySPAN stuff. Sorry for nerds people here. I know we're all nerds, but
Hey, that was my line.
I know. Sorry. In the script, no. So the tutorials, again, we talked about this before. The schedule online is correct. The printed one is probably at this point not correct. The two things that moved are the coexistence of spectrum sharing, the machine learning for security, and security for machine learning has been moved. There is also in the printed schedule posters and demos. They had to be taken down in order to accommodate the tutorials. Today, we'll let you talk about your stuff, and I'll talk about my stuff.
Sorry, there's a quick edit to the slide since this morning. So in Spectrum Week, we're continuing the SpectrumX meetings, but kicking off the NerdsCom event. So that'll kick off right after the keynote. We'll have some working sessions for SpectrumX on continuing with our flagship projects and broadening participation, working on our intercultural development plans. Then we'll have a joint panel on experimentation and data. And in the afternoon, nerds will continue with field experiments, sharing test beds, and we'll have the SpectrumX poster session. So look forward to seeing you there. Oh, please.
That's right, yeah, so that's it. Yeah, I was figuring I'd get a second chance at this. Not that there are any surprises here in our scheduling, as you've probably noticed. On the DySPAN side, which will get the opportunity to say that. Technical program is as advertised, tutorials are as advertised. It is during one of the tutorials, or two of the tutorials, that this Nerds Open session is happening. It is not in the printed agenda, but it is a thing that's probably of interest to the entire community, the National Spectrum Strategy and 7 gigahertz. Then again, the joint panel, and of course more tutorials in the afternoon for DySPAN.
Just about ready for the keynote?
Just about ready for the keynote.
Before we get to the keynote, though, there is one or two more things that we want to do here really quickly. So first of all, on behalf of Spectrum Week and NSF, we really want to thank the DySPAN folks for working together to have a joint event, and especially Eric. We want to say thank you, and so we're going to give him one of our Coexist t-shirts. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you. And as well, we want to thank the Spectrum Week people. I think it's really helped revitalize the agents, the groups. Are we ready for?
And I think there's one more thing from Randy.
So I'm here as the steering committee chair for DySPAN, and just wanted to add to the thanks. I think both of the people up here on the stage deserve an extra round of applause for all the work that they put into this. And for Eric, we have
The big plaque.
The big plaque.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't think he knew when I first asked him that this was going to be joint with Spectrum Week. That idea came from John Chapin, who I think also deserves a round of applause for engineering this in the background. All right, so next on to Tom.
Okay, now for what you're all here for. So yeah, Giulia and Tom, if you all could come on up here. And actually we'll go formal here. Dr. McHenry. I think that's probably the first time I've ever called you that. She is Chief of the Office of Economics and Analytics at the FCC. Her office was next to mine for a while. And previously served as the Chief Economist at NTIA. Dr. Hazlette, it's also probably the first time I've called you that, is the Hugh Macaulay Endowed Professor of Economics at Clemson University. He is a SpectrumX co-PI. And he also served previously as the Chief Economist of the FCC. So with that, I will have a seat, maybe ask some questions. Definitely room for audience participation as well. Thank you. That's right.
Where does it knock?
As long as there's no radio
I'll just
interference
pull it
or
off.
that's right. That's right. So let's start with something easy. Tom, what would you say the essential problem is with spectrum allocation? I mean, why is it so contentious? The battles are long-lived, and it's taking years or decades to get new services to get bandwidth to do stuff.
Are you done with the introductions?
Yeah.
Installing?
By the way, did they give you a certificate? It looked like a parking violation. Plaque. No, thank you very much for having me, and it's a delight to see all of my engineering friends. That was a punchline.
That's right.
Just kidding. Some of my best friends and co-authors are engineers. In fact, I do have a co-author who's a very eminent co-author, and in fact, Vernon Smith. You may know him, a Nobel Prize winner in 2002. And in his autobiography that all the prize winners write and register on the Nobel Prize site, he says the following: "After I got a double E at Caltech, getting a PhD in economics at Harvard was a snap." And so I said to him, you know, Verna, you're getting a prize in economics, and it might be considered a little disrespectful people who gave you the award to say how easy that field was compared to another field. You didn't seem to get the point, but anyway. I do know how engineers think, and good engineers are great resources for economists, and I hope economists can reciprocate for the engineers. So what was the question?
Essential problem with spectrum allocation.
The essential problem. So here's the deal. You put a tremendously valuable resource, a big pile of it, right in the center of one of the most interesting, dynamic, growing, and socially important industries in the world. And you say, well, we haven't really figured out the rules yet. We've got some guidelines. Go to it. See how this is going to get distributed. And we put something together in 1927 in the United States, and roughly the same era elsewhere around the globe, that literally was the broadest, vaguest, just on this side of legal constitutional standard, public interest, convenience, and necessity. That's what you're going to do. We're going to have regulators decide public interest, convenience, and necessity. That was February 23, 1927. We're still working on that. And then we've come up with other terms like harmful interference, and I'm sure today there will be another paper published on how we've never defined harmful interference, and one tomorrow as well, because those aren't terms that admit to easy definitions. Now, that doesn't mean we can't make use of the radio spectrum, and in fact, we've made tremendous use of the radio spectrum in many respects. But when we look at the history, and it is important to look at the history, we're in fits and starts. As we try to move forward, we're running into block walls at almost every point in terms of the conflicts that develop between the various demands. And sometimes the rules just help the conflict. But other times, over the last nearly 100 years now, the rules help resolve the conflicts. So I'll conclude my answers with a self-citation, my most cherished commentary. So yes, in 2017 I wrote a book with the title, The Political Spectrum, The Tumultuous Liberation of Wireless Technologies from Herbert Hoover to the Smartphone. And liberation, and I would say liberalization, of the basic rules that have come down and which started much stricter and more rigid and more sort of politically rigged and impossible for efficiency, those rules have loosened. And competition has come into our world. And if we chart it correctly, we can see the correlation with the tremendous innovation that's been unleashed. And a lot of people in the room are part of that. And I suspect a good fraction don't know exactly which parts of this liberation allowed them to work on the project that made a difference. But on the policy side, it's incumbent upon those who think seriously to try to take the examples that we have. It's a rich and wonderful story, and try to figure out how we can do better, because obviously we've got a long way to go.
Do you want to try a slide? I got something
I
else
guess-
if you want.
No, well, let me take a little swag at this, and then we'll go from there. But I think taking it up a notch, or taking it, sort of bringing it into today, right? So Tom has a history, and I do think it's important to remember that all of this is happening on, allocation is happening on the backs of 100 years of previous allocations, and that's a huge part of the problem. But I think we sort of, it is, in my mind, the problem of spectrum allocation really comes down to, we've got incumbencies that require certainty on one side, and these are systems that have been around for decades, and they're systems that are working, and they're systems that are essential to the US government, to our security, to our safety, and to our economy, all of those things, versus innovation, right? And then and the strength of the USG, of the economy, of all of these things in future innovation. And so getting that balance between ensuring certainty for incumbencies and making sure that existing users can continue to get the use they need, and eking out and looking to the future and finding room for that innovation. That, in my mind, is the inherent challenge, and we're doing that within a space where, where we also have a huge number, at least in this country, of federal regulations and rules that establish that certainty, but also make innovation very hard.
Great. Well, that kind of naturally leads into what's going on in OEA related to Spectrum.
So a number of things. Many things are going on. Some obvious ones are not going on. But I think actually on Tuesday. So first of all, Eric, thank you for having me. It's great to be here. It's really nice to see DySPAN getting rejuvenated, and it's great to see so many faces. A lot of whom I have not seen since 2020. So this is good. It's nice. It's nice to be here. And so. Talking a little bit about what we are doing today. I mean, national spectrum strategy, I think, is a huge part of that. On Tuesday, the chairwoman announced the FCC's Spectrum Steering Team, is what we are calling it, which will essentially be leading the FCC's effort related to the national spectrum strategy. And we will be, working with the White House and NTIA, both of whom put in a remarkable effort to get the national spectrum strategy together. And so our FCC Spectrum Steering Team will be bringing together economists from OEA, that's my division, we're an office, with policy experts and engineers from across the commission, particularly the Office of Engineering, the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau, as well as the Space Bureau and others. So that is really a huge part of what we're thinking about right now, how to start collaborating with in those. I think a lot of work is already getting done, and the FCC is already focused on the study plans, so that's going on. But then also, I personally am cognizant of all of the other things past the study plan in the spectrum strategy that are looking at incentives, right? That are looking at methodologies, how can we do better at frameworks for valuation, frameworks for not just economics, but also, broader, essentially, sort of good for, the thinking broadly about value, I would say. So I think that's a little bit of what's going on. Obviously, and this is something we can touch on more, one thing we do not have is spectrum authority, is auction authority. And so that is, an area in which I think not having that authority for a number of important reasons will actually sort of has the possibility of slowing us down in terms of coming up with good ways, sort of the best ways to share.
You mean you can't put together an auction in 3 weeks?
I wish. We can't even, I mean, the reality is we can't even put together an auction in a year, right? And we can talk about this more if people are interested. But, Congress will say do it in a year. The reality is we've been working on it for 4 before then. So.
That's right, yeah. Yes. Tom, so as we're talking about auctions, it used to be everything was exclusive, and then it was, well, we can make a better use of the band, we'll shuffle people around, well, we'll have incentives to move people around so that basically we can get cleared spectrum. And now there was a lot of talk here about sharing spectrum and other kind of concepts there. So, I mean, do you think people kind of understand how things are changing from like exclusive to shared to maybe something else?
Well, certainly change is in the air, and it has been for some decades. We've been having to try new things. I mean, there is this idea, of course, that we've run out of this clean virgin spectrum, and that's new. It's new since 1927, and it's not new because of the physical scarcity of radio spectrum, as the Supreme Court got stumbled on, and it's not new because of other politically motivated arguments. We have a Chinese threat. That means my 5G policy wins. Did you know that that's the rule in Washington? That's considered a good argument. People get paid a lot of money for thinking it up. But No, it's a simple situation where if you have this sort of grab bag situation where there's no real demand revelation in terms of price rationing for the resource, you're obviously going to have a lot of politics and a lot of lobbying and jockeying. And people always wonder about these conflicts, whether it's the FAA and 5G and so forth. There are always bargaining situations that break down or, preempted, not allowed to start. I have another economist friend who was telling me a great story, I thought, a few years ago about his terrible dog. And he said it's completely lazy, just sleeps, doesn't do much, eats everything they feed him. They feed him the best food. They just take total care of him. And he says, he's just, he's totally a stupid dog. And I said, the dog is the stupid one in that story. That's the gig I'm looking for. Anyway, we look at this asset out there that's unpriced and available for a good story, and then we find some of the worst stories we've ever heard to allocate the resource. Well, of course, there's going to be this kind of a competition. And there's all kinds of folklore that pops up. 1990, I cite this in my book, it's just a classic. In 1990, there was an allocation at the FCC for 6 megahertz of radio spectrum for airplane phone calls. And the National Journal, 100% assurance I have that they got this from FCC officials.
I wasn't there.
She wasn't born
Back in
yet.
high school.
She's got an alibi. 100% certainty, this is from an FCC official, shows up in the reputable National Journal that this is the last 6 megahertz that can be allocated for any new service. At that time, there was 50 megahertz allocated to cellular. Cellular, just what's counted by the FCC as cellular, and it is flexible use, so you have to put a footnote on all this, is about 1,150 megahertz right now, today as we sit here. 30 years later, 34. Somehow we came up with something. The physical constraints are not what they appear, but if you don't have a system for demand revelation and figuring out what's available, who can move, who can do something like the satellite folks can go from 500 to 200 megahertz of usage without any real problems that can't be solved by $13 billion of upgrade. Well, okay, we laugh because we live in this funny world where cooperation induced by actual transactions is thought to be weird. And even we talk about auctions, the auctions we generally talk about are license sales, not reallocation of spectrum from one use to another. We're living in a very constrained world still on how to move these institutions forward to at least the 20th century, if not the 21st. So, yeah, there's tremendous opportunity, and as I say, a lot of it is in front of us because we have had these debates and we have had these experiments. And yes, Ronald Coase, wrote as an economist thinking about if you had a more responsive system to reveal information about relative costs and benefits, it might work better. It was not his assertion that it would. He said it should be tried. When he gave that talk at the FCC in 1959, the first question from a commissioner, tell us, Professor Coase, when they call you professor at Washington testimony, you know something's coming after that. Tell us, Professor, is this all a big joke? All a big joke. That was where the conversation started. And by the way, there's a little later, if you go to 1977, there was another commissioner, Glenn O. Robinson, a wonderful law professor at UVA, retired now, but a wonderful commissioner, actually put in some little footnote in an FCC proceeding that, we ought to go to auctions at some point. And 2 other commissioners immediately looked at that and beat up on him and said, the chances that the FCC would ever hold an auction for spectrum rights are about equal to those on the Easter Bunny in the Preakness. See, so you should have put your bet on the bunny. It only took, what, another less than 20 years for that to be a better bet. But the way we use auctions is very constrained. The way we still approach the allocations is very administrative. The way the FCC gets information about costs and benefits is in pleadings, sometimes written by economists, sometimes written by engineers, always submitted and honed and shaped by lawyers to try to...
Many of the people in this room.
The people in this room, that's right. And in fact, there's a lot of information there. The FCC is not stupid in using this notice of inquiry, notice of proposed rulemaking, notice of order, second order of reconsideration. I've cited one, 14th order on reconsideration. But that's the way you draw information from the people who have the information, who are interested in giving you important details about what you're doing. The regulators are not out to lunch on this. They're operating within the constraints. Everybody, all the interest groups are operating within the constraints. I know a lot of my FCC world friends, oh, the DOD, you know, and they just don't, you know, they're like on the other side, you know. The broadcasters, aren't they terrible? They won't listen to reason. The problem with the broadcasters is that they do listen to reason. They don't listen to the poetry. And when we put something on the table where they had an opportunity to bid and internalize gains from cooperating, nobody talks about how it was tough to talk them into it. The papers that need to be written now is how they outfox the design of the FCC auction, and how the limits of the FCC auction still leave us with a great majority of the 1952 TV allocation in place, when in fact, you know, we should be moving along. 210 megahertz is sitting there reserved for I Love Lucy, in case you're interested. When we have cable and satellite and over the top, and we get it on our telephones. You know, we've moved on in the world, but we can't get the institutions to come with us and to reveal the demands that are there for the reallocation. But the fact that the FCC did do something quite innovative out of the National Broadband Plan, almost 15 years ago now, is important for us to understand. It's important to understand what their strategy was, how it was implemented, the restrictions that were put in place, and how that can be applied elsewhere. So these kind of the idea of a two-sided auction has been used in multiple situations, including in this satellite C-band, which was in many respects an amazing reallocation that happened fairly quickly by FCC standards. Endpoints are tough, but maybe you can say it took about 4 years from start to finish, and just a little longer to get some of that spectrum out there.
I was going to say 3.
What'd you say?
I was going to say 3, but...
See, so we can have an argument over 3 to 4. That shows you that that's not the 6 to 13.
And that we're talking about years, not decades.
Yeah,
That's
sorry.
right. That's right, and it happened. Yeah, and it happened. So, you know, a lot of people say, well, we want to give the FCC credit and this and that, and that's a way to ingratiate yourself to the regulator. I understand that. You can't take them out to lunch anymore and ply them with martinis. So
That's right.
you can put in the record that they're the best regulators who ever lived,
That's right.
or were even imagined by previous generations.
That's right. That's right.
But and in some cases, you're actually be telling the truth, because a lot of good people do go through Washington and try to do the right thing. I've seen it. I know it can happen, and I respect a lot of my FCC friends for doing the right thing. But the point is not that. It's that you want to have an environment in which that can thrive, not only attracts those people, but gives them the leash to go and overcome the red tape, the inertia, and the rent-seeking equilibrium. And we're still, you know, we're still surrounded by it. You all know it, but I highly suggest we don't blame it on the broadcasters or the DOD or the cellular folks or the unlicensed folks, that we understand what the competing business models are, the competing strategies are, and how the different access rights actually do serve various purposes, and as I say, use the history of how we started with this very top-down. You used the word exclusive on the first part, that we had exclusive. This is one of my triggering words. It's like the University of Chicago Economics Department is famous that you stand up to give a paper and you tell the title of your paper and you're immediately attacked. You know, they have whole seminars where they never got to the first page. So when you say exclusive, so then you got Hazlette sitting here, then you got a problem. Right. Yeah. So these rights were exclusive in a certain sense, but in a more important sense, they were not exclusively assigned to responsible. The rights to use spectrum were not assigned to exclusive parties, exclusive rights in the market. They were held by the regulators. The regulators dictated what a TV broadcast license could be, literally defined the technology. The business model had to be advertising supported, not subscription. The height of the transmitter, the location of the transmitter. So they did leave content to some degree to the marketplace, although they had, equal time and all that. But what I'm saying is, we need to understand more about the importance of making those rights flexible use. And the flexible use idea has come in to licenses, that spectrum could be used for one thing and then another, and it's come into unlicensed in an important way. And Michael Marcus and I just having another chat about what happened 40 years ago with a little bit of loosening up that was very controversial and non-popular at the time. And welcome back from Siberia, Michael. I know you enjoyed your trip. But that flexibility really sowed the way for tremendous innovation and breakthrough. And it's, again, like President Carter said at the Vietnam War, it's an incomplete success. And we have a lot longer to go with figuring out how to get that flexibility within an orderly system where coordination and bargaining between the interested parties can usefully take place.
Yeah, well, in terms of interaction and bargaining, anything you want to talk about auctions there? Because I saw you were like, speaking of exclusive.
Well, yeah, no,
Now I triggered Giulia.
Yeah. Well, actually, exclusive also did trigger me.
I think success.
I think pure exclusive use is a thing of the past and has been a thing of the past, even on the commercial side for a long time, right? And I think that's important to recognize. It's not about exclusive use. It's about flexible use. It's about allowing commercial users to use the spectrum with certainty, right? So I think one, there we agree. And I think you might have been suggesting also that these things take time, not just because of the FCC, but because of all of the stakeholders, right? I mean, I think all of these, whenever we're talking about repurposing spectrum, cooperating, sharing, the reality is it's not just the FCC, it's the commercial users, it's the federal users, it's whoever the incumbents are, right? So, and I think the time is not just about us planning an auction or us getting an order out, right? The whole purpose of the rulemaking process at the FCC is really to allow transparency to whatever extent possible into how the FCC is making rules, right? And that inherently takes time. And I think the reality is this is spectrum use is really, it's all the stakeholders in this room and many more. And so that time is getting all of the stakeholders involved in a band to be on the same page, right? And to get to a point where we're all comfortable moving forward. And so it's not just the FCC, that these things take time for a number of reasons, right? And all of that communication has to take place. So that's one. Let's see, what else so that's one piece. I think, the FCC has been devoted to sharing and focused on how can we share the spectrum for a long time. I think what we're also focused on, and what my office, my office and probably me for years before that has also been focused on is where is the value to commercial users, right? So to the extent we're going to share the spectrum, how can we get the most both for national security purposes and national science and all of the sort of the non-economic, if you will, pieces, but also then how can we get the most out of the value for the spectrum that commercial users are using? And where is that balance between, and the reality is it's hard to find a balance between, life-saving, public safety use, national security, right? All of the things that are, valueless, right, because they're so important, and 5G and an economy that can support communications and allow for us all to be sitting with 5G in our pockets right now. So and thinking about 6G. All of these things are in many ways like limitless value to the economy and to the USG, and we have to think about what the right balance is. So I think the reality is this all takes time, and I think another important word that Tom got to was flexibility, right? Like that this all, the reality is there is not much flexibility in the bureaucracy, right? There's, given the rules and the way, and we can talk, this will get into some sort of institutional economics, right? But the reality is everybody in the USG is working within the constraints of the rules that Congress puts on us, and a number of those rules are there to protect the citizens, right? And sort of establish fair play amongst us all. But it all takes time. But within that, I think flexibility for, at least for the auctions division, for the FCC, whatever flexibility we can get within that, I think is really where you have found some of the more interesting wins, frankly, of where we have been able to find good sharing. So taking it to the recent history, early on, the point I think I cringed at was at one point Tom said, that really there is no real, auctions isn't particularly useful or hasn't been particularly useful recently with respect to repurposing. And the reality is that's just not true, right? I think the incentive, the broadcast incentive, notice I wasn't looking at him when I said that. The broadcast incentive auction was really only the beginning, right? So back in 2012, we got authority to do incentive auctions. We ran the broadcast incentive auction, which, of course, because it was incredibly complicated, took years to put it into place. And we can talk about that, but I think that is since then, we've also had a number of excellent examples of where while it has taken time, we have been able to repurpose from commercial to commercial and from federal to commercial and find room and share when the reality was it was not worth, when that balance wasn't there and it made more sense to share the spectrum, right? So talking about some of those, do I have time to talk about some of the examples that I have?
Go ahead.
All right, okay. So first one, obviously the $80 billion elephant in the room would be the C-band, right? And that was a place where there was a lot of flexibility, or we worked within, there wasn't a lot of flexibility. We worked within all of the constraints that we had to find a solution that allowed us to get to a point where the satellite providers could be reimbursed for the moves for freeing up the spectrum could be made available, and everybody could get something out, right? And that took an incredible amount of work internally between the Wireless Bureau, the General Counsel's Office, the chair at the time, OEA, to be thinking about where is the path, right? What's that path that gets us to a point where we can get this whole thing to work? And the reason why I think this one's really, so 3 years, so 2017 was the Commission's mid-band NOI, which essentially kicked off that discussion of where can we do this, what can we do? And so that, if you count that as the beginning, we ultimately auctioned spectrum in 2020, 3 years. That's actually remarkably quickly, right? But I think that was a case where, now I've lost my train of thought, right? OEA, WTB, we were all in the mix in the discussion about how to make that work. And the only way we can all be in the mix about how to make it work, how to make the repurposing work, how to make the auction work, to reassign the licenses, how to get the value so that we can bring people to the table, which auctions still is the best way that we can realize whatever the sort of that value is that people are willing to pay for. That was everybody in the room for years before the auction actually took place, and years before I got hauled up to the Senate to talk about it. So that's where we need the flexibility of having auction authority, because without that, that conversation is very stilted, because we can't mention the word auction, right? So it's like if we magically reassign the spectrum, well, if you're magically reassigning the spectrum, then unicorns are running by because it's just not where we are. And so I think we have to allow that to be part of the discussion because it is really important. But there are also other examples. And one of them was auction 103, which is where we essentially, so that was, for people who don't remember, that was lower 37, 39, and 47. And that was a repurposing where we still argue internally whether it was truly an incentive auction or not. But we created, we were able to, we had the flexibility within the auctions division to talk about a way to essentially allow the existing users who are commercial to give up their licenses within the context of the auction, and then either be reimbursed through the auction or get similar, sort of bid on similar license as part of the auction. And so that was another great place where we found the flexibility, but it took a ton of work. That was what I did during the government shutdown, and frankly, all of the auctions division and half of the wireless bureau did too, right? And so that's another area where it took a lot of time, it took a ton of time to figure out and come up with the right solution, but it was there. And then there are also, other things took less time and involved federal users, where I think we did come to a place where we found a way to share. And maybe it's not dynamic sharing, right? Like maybe it's not like the fancy kind of sharing we all want to talk about, but I think auction 110, right? 3.45 was a great example of where we could eke out 100 megahertz. Eric's nodding proudly. And that one was, they say time to auction is 3 years. It felt faster than that to me.
It did feel faster.
Yeah,
it had to have been because it was while I was there.
But I think that's right. But I think that's an example of where we came up with a solution. There were outside forces, I think, that were directing the FCC and other agencies to come up with a solution. We were able to come up with a solution, which is sharing. It's geographic sharing, not as sexy as dynamic sharing, but still very effective, I think, and a great use of the band. So I could continue on. We could talk about auction 105, which is the CBRS, right? But I think there are a wide variety of examples where we have found a way to be flexible. But all of that flexibility takes time, it takes communication, it takes cooperation and collaboration across the USG or with whatever stakeholders are involved. And that's where I will get back to my constant drumbeat, right? That flexibility that requires us to have the authority so we can talk about auctions.
Yeah. So if anyone dares, we can take a question, and while somebody's daring and the microphone's coming out, while the microphone's coming out, we'll have a response. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
No,
I'm on medication. You gotta give me.
That's amphetamines. That's some medication.
Giulia knows. I think she remembers that I consider her my intellectual granddaughter, and she knows why. You don't have to know the long story now.
I would agree with that.
But in fact, I'm very proud of Giulia, which might embarrass her. Maybe I have no right to be, but she's.
I appreciate that, Tom.
In my mind, she's part of part of the. If not an offspring, she's at least part of my Amway pyramid. And
we need Coleman in the room to make this all make sense.
and I did not say that we haven't used auctions to reallocate.
No.
And if you find me on the tape saying that, I'll accuse you of manufacturing AI that tape because it should be corrected. There's no way that I'm ever going to say that. And in fact, using the C-band auction to explain that there has been a reallocation, if you go back to 2017, 2018, you'll find analysts telling people to understand what the proposal was by reading Hazlette's book. Okay, so this is not something I was late on. And nor have I not understood, and everybody has to understand this, I hope, that yes, reallocation is important. In fact, I think this is probably my favorite example. In 2002, 2006, we did 2 or 3 auctions that were not too exciting, a little mismanaged, but God bless the FCC for auctioning off rights to Channel 55, the TV channel. with flexible use rights. And Qualcomm got into those auctions, and it was not nationwide, it was sporadic, pieces here and there, but they had this thing called media flow. They wanted to do video to your, and CNN, television, to your phone. Radical idea. That'll never work. Anyway, they didn't have it. They didn't have broadband mobile at the time. And God bless San Diego. They thought of a way to do it. They spent $1 billion on licenses, and then most of the rest of it on the technology media flow, how to stick it on a Verizon or an AT&T phone and get you a subscription. And they took the Channel 55 broadcast stations. They had the rights. It was actually an overlay. They had to pay the stations to go dark, and they negotiated the market for that. They got nationwide coverage, spotty though it might be, to try out this new idea. By 2010, people in San Diego were saying, give me that report. How much do we lose on this? And so it was not going well. And they say, how much is that spectrum valued at in an alternative use? Get AT&T on the phone. And so they cashed out. They put media flow aside. Of course, it was superseded very quickly by just plain old, good old American mobile broadband, where we can get anything we want. And Qualcomm didn't have to come up with some secret sauce to do it. And they, fortunately for the shareholders of Qualcomm, they did bail that out with a nice capital gain just in owning the spectrum. But the point was the market dictated that there could be a transition from television. A company that wanted to invest $1 billion was able to do so. The spectrum store was open. And the resource, the radio spectrum resource, was used for a very nice experiment. And when Qualcomm shareholders had enough of that, they cashed out and went in a direction that's been very profitable for a lot of people, including Qualcomm. So that's the way the world should work in my space. So those were auctions. We have it. And as I also said, it's a work in progress. Let me just hit two things quickly. You did use the term exclusive use. That's why I saved a space between us.
No, I was the guilty party. I was the guilty. As usual, it was my fault.
The most, exclusive use. Let me just say why that's a problem. Exclusive rights do enable some delegation, creation, if you will, as Peter Huber called it, a mini FCC. The owner of those rights gets to have their own space with their own rules, their own interference parameters, and their technologies. That is not exclusive use. That's an exclusive right offered in the marketplace, goes to the highest bidder usually, should under the auction system or any other system, and allows there to be this flexibility. Financial markets help dramatically in this, and gets efficiencies that are unknown to top-down regulation. And it is not exclusive use. It is the most densely packed innovation we have using those rights. And a lot of it does have to do with the ability of financial markets to improve throughput. So that's exclusive rights. They're very important. Exclusive use is nowhere. Nobody buys spectrum. In fact, nobody allocates radio spectrum for one user, except in good old days like when we had the forestry channel. And in downtown New York, there was forestry spectrum, okay? So that's where you can get exclusive use and massive inefficiency. That's the classic example. The other side of it is sharing. All spectrum is shared, all relevant spectrum we're ever going to talk about. The mobile, the flexible use mobile bandwidth, we call it, that's massively shared. And the question is, who figures out the sharing rules and how the business models work? And we want competition, generally speaking, in the market for that. We have some actual public interest and some interchange between public agencies where the sorts of currencies that are used might be different, innovative, not exactly a dollar auction. But, and regulators are well aware of many of these solutions. And things even like FirstNet are innovative ways to try to put some of these demands together with a regular auction and then something that augments that. But the idea that we're sharing, yes, the innovative two-sided auction to move spectrum from over-the-air broadcasting allocations from 1952 into the modern era of mobile, that's sharing spectrum. Television station owners decided to share spectrum. They were paid $10, $12 billion to share their spectrum. And it's now going to T-Mobile and other companies that bought the rights. That's a wonderful form of sharing. Now, it's never referred to that in these discussions, but that is, in fact, the way very productive sharing can take place and often does. And we shouldn't just think of ourselves, again, as being hamstrung by the visions of 1927, where there are rules coming down, and they define what use is and what sharing is.
So, Mike, I hate to do this to you, or I love doing this to you, but it is 9:30. And you have all of our phone numbers and email addresses. But I did want to do a pitch and give you an opportunity for a pitch, which is, in this audience, we have economists and engineers and some public policy people. If you're an economist, consider what Tom did. Go on IPA and work at the FCC. If you're an engineer, consider doing what I did, which was go on IPA at the FCC. The dockets are open to anyone, even if 12 times we
Or
disagree with
NTIA.
Dr. Berger,
I
or
think
NPRMs. And so in that context, what do you think, with now's your chance with all these people here that are thinking big thoughts, what would be helpful for you in the office for them to be thinking about?
Okay, so first I'm going to, I think NTIA is also looking for a chief economist because theirs left a few years ago. And I think right now with the National Spectrum Strategy, I think honestly for economists in this room, NTIA could be at least as interesting a place as OEA. And also you would definitely be more of a unicorn because I have 60 economists that work for me. So that would be one thing. I think right now is one of those moments where truly, right, we are looking for kind of what's the next spectrum, right? What is next? And I think that really requires, I think a lot of what SpectrumX is doing, right? Thinking about all of the pieces. And so I think the study plans are critical because that is the cart, or that is the analogy. I keep wanting to use the analogy, and then I never know which is the cart and which is the horse. But we're not going anywhere until we get those study plans and we understand what the realm of possible is within those. But I also think we are at one of these moments where we need the technology to go kind of to the next level, right? Like a lot of this, if we truly want to sort of make some of these things really happen with, I don't know, maybe we can call it more intensive sharing, then truly the engineering has to be there to develop some of these DSS technologies that to get us to that point. But then it also, meanwhile, I think we're having, on the economic side, a big part of that discussion is where is the value, right? Where is that trade-off? Where do we have a willingness to pay? What makes financial sense? In many ways, I think that's step 2 because we've got to know what the realm of the possible is in terms of the engineering first. But I think that is an important component that we all need to be thinking about and talking about. And frankly, I think many of those discussions are actually better had in the public policy sphere. So I welcome all those studies that talk about it, and sort of looking at where the value is. That also means we need the commercial sector here to tell us where they think they have value, right? Because they're the ones who are going to be selling this. They're the ones who understand the marketplace the best. And so I think we are at one of these moments where it's not one of these pieces, it's everybody has to chip in. And I definitely think, I think the FCC has IPAs. We're certainly exploring those. We currently have our chief economist is Johannes Bauer. He's great and phenomenal and loves this stuff. So go talk to him about some of this stuff because he's ready to talk to everybody about it. And then he's going to be like, "What have you done, Giulia?" But then I think it's really everybody. So, you know, I think now is one of those critical moments where we can all pitch in and do our part in order to find that new spectrum. Because all those timeframes I was talking about, that really is, that's the community talking about it. That's the engineers, the economists, the lawyers, you know, the policymakers, all of them together. And we are at one of those moments to find what's going to be the 6G spectrum.
Well, that's great. Well, we are running a little bit late, but we want to formally thank you. And as well, don't run out, because the Spectrum Week, people want to take a picture of everybody. But Jimmy, if I can do the formal thank yous.
Do I get a T-shirt?
Julia first, so I don't have to read.
These are not
But
parking
Julia,
tickets.
thank
Ah,
you
thank
so
you. Oh,
much.
wow. This is-
Yes.
yes.
And Tom, thank you so much for
Cool.